How is freediving breathwork different from other breathwork? That's a question I got today, and it's a very interesting question actually. Let me get into this. What do we teach in freediving and what do I teach in my underwater squad? I teach how to breathe before we take a final breath, the big breath, and then we hold our breath. So I teach the breathing we do before, how we take the final breath, and then how we hold the breath, because breath holding is also breath work, right? So that's what we teach in freediving, that's what I teach. And how is this different from other breath work? If you're not planning to be a freediver, would you still benefit from learning freediver breathing techniques? And the answer is absolutely yes, of course, and here is why. What do we teach in freediving as breath work, as breathing? It is tidal breathing. Now, tidal breathing is nothing special, it's just normal breathing through the nose, normal light breathing. There is nothing special about this. But to understand the concept of tidal breathing and how important this is, we need to understand about hyperventilation and hypoventilation. So hyperventilation is overbreathing, breathing more than you need to, or breathing more than your metabolic needs at that moment. And underbreathing, hypoventilation, is breathing less than your metabolic needs. Now, underbreathing doesn't happen often. I think few people, maybe nobody, will be underbreathing unless you deliberately want to underbreathe, and that's what we also learn in freediving. But most people, they will either do normal tidal breathing without even knowing they're tidal breathing, because it's normal baseline breathing. So if you have a healthy breathing pattern, you're not breathing too fast, you're not stressed, there's no dysfunction going on, so you're breathing healthily, correctly, that would be normal baseline breathing, tidal breathing. That would be okay. But if you would be breathing more than that as a result of bad breathing habits, and many people have bad breathing habits, then you would be hyperventilating. Now, many people think that hyperventilation is only when you get those panic attacks, or when you do those big breaths in, like the Wim Hof method. Of course, it's hyperventilation. That's already heavy hyperventilation. What many people don't understand is that a little bit of overbreathing is also already hyperventilation. It's milder hyperventilation than heavy hyperventilation, and for instance the Wim Hof method, but it's already hyperventilation. And if you do this 24 hours a day, always during all of your life, this is chronic mild hyperventilation, and this is sometimes in scientific articles described as hidden hyperventilation. You can look that up, hidden hyperventilation, because people don't know they're actually hyperventilating. And if you would tell them you're hyperventilating, they would probably be very surprised, or they would argue with you that they're not hyperventilating, because they don't know. So back to the question, what are we teaching in freediving? Everything comes down to not hyperventilating. So we are teaching students in such a way that they understand the concept of hyperventilation so that they can avoid this. So tidal breathing, the volume of tidal breathing is more or less half a liter per respiration. And if you would breathe 12 times per minute, which is also more or less, because some people breathe less, some people breathe more, depending on how fit you are, or how tall, or how big your rib cage is, your lungs. So 12 breaths per minute, half a liter per respiration, that would be 6 liters per minute that you breathe. That would be the tidal volume of tidal breathing. So if you would breathe more than 6 liters per minute, that would be hyperventilation. So breath work in freediving comes down to not hyperventilating, because you do not want to hyperventilate. And why is learning this as a non-freediver important? Because hyperventilation comes with lowering of CO2 and comes with a lot of issues, and one of them is the vasoconstriction to the vital organs. So when you hyperventilate, because of the lower CO2, your blood vessels to the vital organs like your heart, your lungs, your brain, they are constricting, which results in less blood flow to the brain. So when you get less blood flow to the brain, even if it's just a little bit, you also get less oxygen. Another consequence of lower CO2 as a result of hyperventilation, even if it's mild hyperventilation, is a reduced MDR, mammalian diving reflex. Now, you might think, well, as a non-freediver, why would I even care about my mammalian diving reflex? Well, this is all related to the vasoconstriction. So mammalian diving reflex, one of the physiological adaptations of MDR, mammalian diving reflex, is vasodilation of the vital organs. So if you have reduced vasodilation, then you have vasoconstriction, of course. So that's one of the physiological adaptations. Another one is bradycardia. So if you have a reduced MDR, mammalian diving reflex, you have reduced bradycardia. So bradycardia is a lowering of the heart rate. So if you have reduced lowering of the heart rate, it means you have an increase in heart rate. You don't want an increase in heart rate, right? So mild hyperventilation is hidden hyperventilation that people don't know, results in higher heart rates, less blood flow to the brain, vasoconstriction to the brain, and there's also a higher blood pressure. So we don't want that, okay? We don't want that. It's not healthy. So the healthy way of breathing is to breathe as minimally as possible without feeling air hunger, because you could breathe less than tidal breathing, but then it wouldn't feel comfortable and you wouldn't be able to sustain this over the whole day, right? You could maybe get away with it to do this a couple of minutes, but then you would really be out of breath and start breathing more again. So that means you have been hypoventilating, you have not been breathing enough. So you can deliberately hypoventilate, under breathe, so that you will feel that urge to breathe and your CO2 will go up as a result of not breathing enough. And that's actually a healthy thing. So breath holding is healthy because of the higher levels of CO2. But if you don't want to hold your breath, you could also just breathe less, under breathe, which has more or less the same effects as breath holding to a lesser degree, but the same effects. So if you breathe less, hypoventilation, you're also going to increase your CO2, and you're going to reap the benefits of higher CO2, which is a increased MDR, which comes with lower blood pressure, more oxygen to the brain. I didn't mention that yet, a better increased Bohr effect. So the Bohr effect describes how oxygen is released from the blood to the working muscles. So if you have high CO2, oxygen gets released to the tissues, the working muscles, in a more efficient way. And if you have low CO2, the Bohr effect is actually reduced. So then the oxygen is released to the muscles in a less efficient way. So that's another problem that comes with hyperventilation, is a less optimal Bohr effect. So you don't want hyperventilation, even if it's just a little bit. So that's what we teach in freediving. That's what I teach in the underwater squad. It is to breathe correctly. Now that is easier said than done. So just by watching this video, you're not going to be able to do this. This needs practice. This needs at least a couple of weeks, if not months. This is a work of life, you know. This is a constant tweaking of your breathing to get to a better place of breathing, a better place of tidal breathing. So in the underwater squad, we start with a 6-week challenge where we pay specific attention to breathing. And then we start the second program, which is the breath hold training program. All of this to increase CO2 levels and to reap the benefits of this. So yes, we practice breath holding for the sake of freediving because that's our sport. So obviously we want to learn to hold our breath longer. But besides that, besides just holding the breath longer, we want to hold our breath because it brings health benefits, longevity, better health to our lives, right? If it would be just for the mere sake of holding our breath for freediving, then I would say, yeah, maybe it's a bit trivial, right? Maybe we're spending so much time on training our breath hold for what? Just for freediving? No, it's so much more than that. You become a better person. You become physically more healthy, but also mentally you become more healthy because through the practice of breath holding, and this is a metaphor for life, you become comfortable with the uncomfortable, and the uncomfortable is holding your breath. So when you hold your breath, you have rising levels of CO2. That is the urge to breathe that eventually translates into contractions, which is the spasms, the hiccups of your respiratory muscles. So that is described by people as uncomfortable. But what is uncomfortable? It's just a description of a feeling, right? So you can learn to become comfortable with the uncomfortable, which is what we learn in freediving courses, which is what you learn in the underwater squad. And if you become comfortable with the uncomfortable, it is no longer uncomfortable. So what was uncomfortable, what was this uncomfortable feeling in the first place, is just you labeling a certain feeling. So through the practicing of breath holding, even if you are not a freediver, you learn to place emotions better, be more grounded, understand emotions better, and understand that the way you react to certain emotions is actually just the way you decided to react to them, And you could also decide to react in a different way to those emotions. And if you want to learn how to do that, join my Underwater Squad, school.com/underwater squad. You will get access to our breath hold training system, weekly Zoom calls, and a worldwide community, people who keep you accountable for your breath hold training. You can chat, you can talk with the people inside the community. You get access to me personally twice a week. I see you inside. And if you want to see another video with 10 tips on how to increase your static apnea breath hold, then watch this video here. Peace in every breath.